Agency Operations Report. The truth behind the ICE raids in the USA, prison camps, and more. Is this the Holocaust 2.0? And the Epstein files. Here we go again with a threatened release. Behind the scenes, the operatives running the U.S. government are hoping to make trillions of dollars to keep their operations running. But did they? And where are all of these children coming from? Today we will take a deep dive into the root of the problem. And there are two Lions Gates which occur each year, one in February and one in August. The most recent one began on February 5th, peaked on the 8th, and should officially end by tomorrow. If it's been a rocky few days for you, here is why. Well, it's the 12th of February. So much happens in just a short few days in between times when we talk. The reports, I know, haven't been coming out as quickly as they should be, simply because I'm juggling a lot of balls over here lately. I've got the regular job, which is extremely busy right now, and that's the one that we often report on. Plus, we're getting closer and closer to this move of mine out of this city, which means they turn up the dial here. So, a lot to juggle, a lot to get done in a very short period of time before we start moving around. So, I'm excited about the move, and, you know, it might be a little sporadic here until we are settled someplace else, but bear with me a little bit. I appreciate your patience sometimes, and I know everybody's anxious for this report, so I'm going to kind of get to it. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about this past week, Lionsgate first, mainly because most people don't understand or don't remember that there are two Lions Gates that happen per year. One of them is in August, which everybody talks about on the internet, and the other one is February 8th. Our understanding of Lionsgate has grown a little bit in the last week, mainly because now we have a better understanding of how it's used against us. You know, everything that happens positively for Earth and for us, Homo sapiens, sometimes, or not sometimes, but all the time there for quite a long time, was used against us. And this past week was no exception. The energies were very off. They were trying desperately to use the gate in the same way that they used to. You see, both occurrences of Lions Gates often bring in a tremendous amount of source, life force, all things source. And those things typically occur in the real world, not in a matrix overlay. In the past, they have always been able to utilize these as an energy boost, which would last them for months until the next Lions Gate. That energy boost, and it's not just energy or Ethereum boost, it also boosts the presence of source in our world. They have utilized that and inverted that energy that comes in, and oftentimes that would result in large amounts of money for them, because it's not just source Ethereum that's converted into energy to power their machines, but it also is utilized for influxes of cash, because it also funnels into our financial system, or used to anyway. That hasn't happened in quite some time, but this year they were still intending on trying to use it. Now, this kind of backfired this year. It was quite different than normal years, as this gate would normally occur right underneath Cheyenne Mountain. Not to say that they hadn't blocked it significantly and overlaid it and created their own versions of things, but it would go from the Northern Cross constellation, which is kind of somewhat considered a constellation in our science. But the Northern Cross over to Cheyenne Mountain, and that would create an opening into the reality world, but only through that port or portal in which they could then determine how best to invert and use all that is source that would come through. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. This year, it started to trickle in to their matrix worlds, which is something that is disastrous for them because the matter that it is mimicking cannot touch the matter that is naturally occurring or the matter that source brings in. When that happens, when they touch, annihilation is a certainty of their matter, not of source. So they worked really hard to ensure that they could patch up or plug up the leaks that started to come through this year. It lasted for probably a few hours on Sunday. They thought that they could use what actually came through to their advantage. That did not work for them in any way, shape, or form. But a couple of nights ago, this snapped. Their patches, quote unquote, snapped. And the floodgates opened and source began to flood the planet. So if you were feeling this strange undercurrent of something very positive happening, at the same time something negative happening, that was the fight, or them fighting against source. They never managed to plug up the hole. They managed to divert the current the best that they could until today. So this has been a battle for the last few days, and again, sometimes this is the reason for delayed reports. There's still work to be done on this particular Lion's Gate to ensure that the gate remains open for source all the time. Therefore, we're going to have an interesting rest of this month. So to start the report, I'm going to go over a few things that have hit the news recently. And I'm going to talk about why they do it so that you understand what you're looking at. First of all, I want to remind you that there is no such thing as bad publicity. That's a saying they have in Hollywood and, in governments and all of that. The focus on these people, whether it's positive focus or negative focus, is still focus. And by focusing, you're basically encouraging your flow of energy, your flow of source to flow to them. You're actually giving consent in a strange way for this to flow directly to these people. In the past, this used to help them tremendously because when your energy flows and you're encouraging the current and the flow to go to these people, oftentimes that would mean the flow of money as well. They were almost counting on it with their publicity campaign of a couple of things that are standing out. The next thing I want you to understand as well is that fear and love are two things we know that motivate Homo sapiens or humans on this planet. Everything that you do is based on fear and love, whether it's love for another person, love for yourself, self-care, or love of doing something that just brings you happiness and joy. Could also be love for, you can say, well, I love having teeth, therefore I will brush them every day. Fear also of losing them. But fear and love necessarily aren't exactly what you expect it to be. See, fear is a future event that may or may not happen. Fear can also be defined as worrying about something that you think may occur in the future based on taking an action or a non-action related to this. Fear also keeps you running on a hamster wheel and looking at the future and not the now. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something like, oh, I'm afraid of these people, or I'm afraid of this. It could simply even be, if I don't show up for work today, then all of these things are going to happen. Consciously or subconsciously, we do things out of fear a lot. And if you take a look at yourself and really think about the definition of fear and the things that you do in a day, you'll understand fear a little bit better. You know, think about every single move that you make during a day or even a couple of days. Write it down. I did this. Why did I do this? And you'll start to recognize the fear and just how deep the program goes. Fear did not exist in the natural world. We had more of a logical wisdom or understanding of things around us. We were often very resourceful as far as solution-based things, and we didn't look towards the future, we looked into the now. Living in the moment was more important to us than living for the future. Fear is used to change the current, and love is often inverted into fear, and both together create time. Doesn't actually extend your day. It's not like we're going to have 24 hours or 25 hours in a day, I should say. But they do create time for the machine. So when you start to think about all of this publicity that's out there and these files and the disgust you feel and your surprise and awe, and then other people are like, well, finally, we're going to get some justice. There's going to be mass arrests and all of this stuff that they're touting, you know, isn't actually going to happen. But they ride the wave of fear and love, protection. This is what we tend to feel as normal people. We tend to want to protect the children. We want to protect these people. We want to end child trafficking. We want to do all of these things, and we want to fight. We fight out of love. Love is your greatest strength when you're fighting for something that you believe in. Well, other people will respond in fear. And right now there's two really big campaigns going on that are creating both, which is helping them create time. At least it used to. That mechanism is breaking down. But I just wanted to preface what I'm about to say with that so that you understand why I'm bringing these two things up. So, I want to talk a little bit about the ICE raids. And for those of you that don't know what ICE raids are, is the U.S. government has taken or whatever you want to call it, has taken a stance against immigrants and immigration. And this has been going on off and on for about a year now, where they are maybe even a little bit longer, but definitely since the beginning of this administration, where they have been blaming immigrants for doing black magic and killing animals and doing all of the things that we don't like to see as people. Therefore, they feel that they are justified in picking up immigrants, killing immigrants, causing disruptions in medical treatment, and a lot of these people are legally here. They've gone through the citizenship process, but they take these people first and then ask questions later. So much so, I do have some friends that were not born in the United States. And these people are now carrying around their papers and their passports, and, they have U.S. passports with them. And, I have one friend in particular that has told me that every time this person leaves the house, she has to call her husband and tell him when she's leaving and when she returns, because they are very, very concerned for their well-being. This is also kind of targeting, in a lot of ways, people that are not white. Meaning a lot of our immigrants are, they think, or they seem to think, are not white. You don't see a whole lot of people in their raids that are, for example, of European descent. We see mostly people from Latin America, Africa, and other places in the world. We don't see a whole lot of white folks being targeted. They have targeted students in general in the last year or so. So the fear that they are creating is very, very real. They have opened up what looks to be like internment camps in places like El Salvador, where they ship a whole bunch of people off to and ask questions later, even if they have a green card. There are disruptions at airports with people coming and going, even though they are actual citizens of the United States. There are a lot of people being taken from their families. I know people that have been taken out of hospitals and ripped from medical treatment based on what this government has decided to do. But the fear is very real. And I wanted to point that out to you. And I'm not saying that it's not a threat, and I'm not saying they're not crazy by any stretch of the imagination. But what it's actually looking like behind the scenes is kind of like the Holocaust. It really does. In the beginning, in the first Holocaust, it was a bunch of Nazis, first taking a bunch of Jewish people, and then it went into gay people and other different people that they could separate from the rest of the population, bringing them to these internment camps where horrible experimentation was actually done on these people. And quite frankly, that's the same thing that is going on right now in a lot of these immigration camps or detainment centers. And if you never believed me when I told you the Nazi Party is alive and well and operating in the United States and every country in the world, or at least 172 of them, now you should believe me, because when if you pull together all of the information and connect all the dots, this is exactly what it looks like. It's not even civilized. It wasn't civilized the first time. It's not civilized this time. There is no actual legal reason for them to be doing what they're doing. And they've got a lot of American citizens scared. And they should be, because horrible things are going on in those detainment camps. Sometimes it's the kids. They take the kids with the cooperation of government departments. They also take young, pretty women and men and boys, and they ship them off to these pedophiles that we're seeing all over the news right now. But this has been going on for a very long time. This time here, it's just the chosen, targeted population. And it's not just America. It's happening in other countries too. There is still, to this very day, somewhere around 35 million slaves. These are people that were taken in much the same way, and then they end up working. I use the term working, but they're working for these people. They take them in, they become maids, they become all kinds of things. I mean, it's like a flashback to decades ago when slavery was well known. Now it's just happening behind the scenes. Some of them are sex slaves, but all of this continues. And right now, This government behind the scenes is absolutely doing this with these people. It's horrific. The amount of experimentation and other things that are happening to these people is terrible. This is probably the worst we have ever seen it. So am I saying this to you to create fear? No, I'm not. I'm saying this to you because I want you to understand what you're putting out there and the power that you're giving to these people to do the things that they're doing. I know in some cases it makes you feel powerless against these people, but in reality, you're just helping the situation. Does that mean that it's going to save a loved one from being picked up by these crazy people? Well, no. But the end result has not been the same as it was during the first Holocaust. I still hear these Q people and the, patriot people and all this saying mass arrests are coming soon. Mass arrests are going to happen. These people are going to Gitmo. Man, we've been hearing that for about, I don't know, at least myself personally, I can say about 16 years. Nobody's gone to Gitmo. Nobody gets arrested and goes to Gitmo. Gitmo is a medi-spa for these people. They go there, they get new limbs, new hearts, and, quite frankly, they're not even human anymore. But it makes me question what they meant by mass arrests. Because I'm wondering now, based on connecting the dots of all the information that I've seen, are they in fact planning on mass arrests of the Homo sapien population of this planet? Because it sure looks that way to me. They've been talking for years about things like FEMA camps. Now we have immigration camps in different parts of the world, and they're shipping them outside the country. Now, it doesn't matter if you're not from Latin America, and you head off to El Salvador or wherever they send you to. It doesn't matter where you're from. This is what they're doing. Will it last forever? No, it won't last forever, because the end result is not being achieved by these people. So you'll see an uptick in the fear. You'll see an uptick in this craziness like we've seen it a couple of times now. And they try to do these things specifically during times of Lionsgate. Now, there are 4 places in the world where Lionsgate, or this particular Lionsgate, hits very heavy. And one of those places is over near the Great Lakes, under Lake Erie. And isn't it kind of, it's not funny, but Minnesota is one of the countries that are being, one of the states that is being targeted right now by these people, and people have died there. So think about what they do, and there's always, unfortunately, an underlying alignment with something or other that makes them want to do this, and in very specific locations. Now that we have hit the 12th today, the peak of the Lionsgate was actually on the 8th, which would have been Sunday. So we are officially 3 days past the gate. And if anything, everything they've gotten has been the opposite of what they expected. So do I expect this to calm down a little bit? I do. I expect that with no result from what they were trying to achieve by creating misery, pain, fear, death, and all the other things they tried to create near these particular areas. Colorado is another place. Here, even in little town Durango, there was a lot of ICE running around in the town, and there's a conflict going on here about that. Also in Denver, we saw quite a bit. So they focus on specific areas for a specific reason. Another one of those places is Mount Denali. So these gates are, where they usually send their machines to basically gobble up all that is organic and of life that comes in from source and take it into the machine to power the machine for another 6 months or so to the next Lion's Gate. And it's been rinse and repeat for centuries. However, it hasn't been rinse and repeat this year, and it hasn't been for some time now, as their gates continue to malfunction. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the Epstein files. Here we go again. We're now doing the thing again. Behind the scenes, and even in some cases in public on social media, they have actually said trillions. They want trillions. Or they're going to release all the names. Meaning if you paid them off, your name wouldn't be released. Well, paying off in this particular case, is an interesting term. You see, the same people that are releasing these files that you think are fighting child trafficking and they're finally going to have these mass arrests of these terrible people, they of course mention people that like we know the Clintons are bad. We know Trump is bad. The whole Trump family has been involved in for a long time. I mean, there's videos from 1992 you can find on YouTube of him with Epstein talking about all the women in the room and passing them around like they are, for sale. So I want to kind of set the record a little bit straight here. And again, this goes back to that fear and love situation and what they're trying to get you to generate on their behalf. Number one, did they get the trillions of dollars in blackmail money from their own people in their own network? Not exactly. They got some not yet issued cryptocurrency, things like USDTC, which currently is not traded. It reminds me a lot of the new dinar that we were supposed to have a decade or two ago. And this USDTC, as well as some other currencies they were planning on issuing off of stablecoin when they had gotten this large influx of power, which was supposed to come by the 8th, then the coin would be worth something if their machine got more power, if they got back some control over the financial system. They've told banks, they told everyone that this was going to happen. Matter of fact, we have several law firms that are still preparing at this moment. Now they said there was going to be a couple more days. That couple more days brings us to today. But you have the entire country of South Korea. You have the United States Treasury. You have China. You have Russia. You have South Africa. You have Iraq. You have Iran. You have Sudan. You have the UK and the entire Commonwealth, including Australia. You have every single one of these countries, 172 countries expecting a big payout. They even sold them shares and seats in the New World Order, the New World Government, whatever it was that they had to do to get these people to move. The Epstein files is just a front. It's basically just a blackmail situation. Now, who is Epstein? And I would say was, but it's not a was, it's an is. I told you a long time ago he went off to Iceland, basically where most people who commit suicide in jail go to. Went off to Iceland, got himself a passport. Most recently he's been spotted in Tel Aviv, and you might see him in several places because he's a human. Meaning he's been cloned several times, he's in several places, he's living several different lives, and he has not stopped being a power broker. And by a power broker, that means he is a big player in the clan or cabal that supplies children. Most oftentimes, that's our children, meaning the Homo sapien population of this planet. They need things like the humans of this planet, ones that were created from a machine. They need things like adrenochrome. They love the pure essence of a child. It's a ritual for them. It's like air to them. Now, there are many of us that also have pure essence, especially those listening to this report. I'll tell you a little bit of an experience that I've had in the past. So I arrive here in Durango, and shortly thereafter, I'm in my house, or not my house, but the house they put me in when I first arrived. And this guy, in the middle of the night, comes into my room. You know, first of all, that doesn't work well for Kim in any way, shape, or form. I caused this person severe pain. But before I realized, because I was asleep, what was going on, all I heard was his voice say, "Wow, your essence is so pure." You know, and he had an intention of doing something else, of course, but it all kind of goes in the same vein as to why these people do what they do. Epstein, in this case, is a power broker for this. These people, these non-people people, love essence. The purer, the better. It's like candy for them. They cannot get enough of it. It is beyond adrenochrome for these people. So, needless to say, in that incident, that did not end well. And, yeah. But, case in point, you know, I've seen it myself. I heard what this guy said. He said a lot of other things, too, about essence. And, you know, I need the essence. And I mean, it was just weird, really. But it was the first time that I had personally witnessed something like this happening. Now, Epstein being a power broker, or, you know, you could say a leader in the trafficking of people to these elite, he mainly did not create the supply chain. The supply chains existed. Some of those people that have run the supply chains are actually working for the U.S. government. We call them operatives. So they are the ones that created the supply chains, along with some other cabal mafia type organizations in the world. There are specific groups that do specific things. As I had told you in the past, for example, you have an oil mafia. You know, everyone from Rockefeller on down. You have an energy mafia, a nuclear mafia, a weapons mafia. You have a mafia for just about everything. And it's not just drugs and Pablo Escobar and, you know, things you see in movies. It's a cabal for everything. And they all report to the same organization. So Epstein is just one of those people. So he takes all of those supply chains, and he'll call them up and say, I need 14 boys, 16 girls, I need 12 under the age of 16, so on and so forth. There's an elite party not only on his island, but also at places like Mar-a-Lago and other locations, wherever these people are. Nancy Pelosi also orders lots of men. Her and her husband like men in their room, and several of them. Nancy Pelosi has also verbalized, I wouldn't say publicly like on the news, but that she'd like to have a harem of men, all servicing her all at the same time. Now, I'm sorry if you had to put down your dinner or laugh, but that's actually what they think. So that's kind of her fantasy. So she would order young men all the time, and her husband also enjoys those men. So this is, that's all Epstein ever was. He didn't go kidnap. The people like him don't get their hands dirty. They don't go and, put these young children in crates and deliver them through San Francisco. No, matter of fact, most of the children that are being trafficked into the United States for elite consumption are coming through a port in San Francisco. Now, let me tell you about the port in San Francisco. A long time ago, dating all the way back to Prescott Bush, in part, but also Bush Sr., had made a lot of deals with a group called the Kuomintang, or the Tangs, as they're often been called. The Tang family or the Kuomintang in the Bush family are, you could say, somewhat related. In this particular case, all of this trafficking and other things that would come in through the port in San Francisco were agreed upon during the Opium Wars. The Opium Wars are also the reason why Afghanistan belongs now to quote-unquote China and used to belong to the U.S. underneath Bush. I have some more information on Bush and how he got so much power in just a little bit here. But you can understand that we all know it. We know it. Customs knows it. If you don't know that, Customs and Borders Patrol is the CIA. So they're all in on it, and they all get their cut, and they all get their 10% here and there, and that's how everybody makes money. And they sell them to people like Epstein. He's the buyer. And then he becomes the dealer, and he charges his friends for them. Sometimes he would give them away for free, simply because, friends do favors for friends. And then we all know that the currency of favors is what actually runs the world. They could even be favors that to an extreme with things like markers, as an example. So, in short, or in long form, Epstein is a power broker. That's it. Taking Epstein down, taking the pedophiles down, is not going to stop human trafficking. Because for every one face you know, there are millions of them you don't know. We have a lot of humans that like pure essence on this planet. A lot. They come and go, and if one goes, then you might see the same face the very next day, because they're all generated by a machine. They thrive on it. They live for it. Whether it's trying to take it directly from source during a Lionsgate, or a Homo sapien, or the planet itself. So this is the reason why this industry exists. It comes out in the news to create fear, love, and I don't mean love for these people, but I mean you want to protect these children. You're doing it out of love. Either way, they invert it and create time for themselves. And they're hoping to make a little money to boot. But the odd part about this very thing is most of the people that they are trying to collect this money and expose the deep state are actually the supply chain. All the Q people are part of the supply chain. They're operatives. They all do it. They are the supply chain. Are they turning against these presidents and heads of state? No, they're not. For what? They already run all these people. They are these people. Are they getting them to donate fake Bitcoin that they gave them to do other things? Possibly. Have they gotten a bunch of historical assets that they think are going to do something for them? Possibly. But they're not going to get hundreds of trillions of dollars because it simply isn't hundreds of trillions of dollars in the system at the moment. You know, they have no knowledge truly of how the system actually works. But this is why we're seeing all of this right now. Are these people going to get arrested any more than Epstein died of suicide in a prison cell somewhere? Absolutely not. Did Epstein miss a beat? Did he lose time? Did he lose a dime? Absolutely not. He still continues to power broker to this very day. They all know him. And it's not just him. There are other power brokers in that industry, and he is just one of several. You know, they feel oftentimes like they're untouchable. And in reality, they kind of are. But it's got nothing to do with prosecution. It's just the role that he needed to play. He needed to draw attention to a lot of people. Again, I will repeat, there is no such thing as bad publicity when it comes to the elite and public figures that you focus your fear and love on constantly. Doesn't matter if it's discussed. It doesn't matter, but we are all focusing, not we, because I'm not. There's a lot of people focusing on these files, thinking that there's going to finally be some justice by the same people that are the supply chains and have continued to be supply chains for people like Epstein all along. They are never going to change. You can't change their brain. It is not their brain. It's not their consciousness. You cannot change them. They literally need essence now more than ever to survive. That being said, it's just blackmail. That's it. And it's not even blackmail in the terms of, you know, oh, we're going to expose you if you don't give us a few $100. It's more just a game. You know, if they don't want to be included in the operation, then they'll pay them some money. And right now, it's all monopoly money behind the scenes. It's no different than someone getting their wad of dinar out of their garage and handing it over, the new dinar, even though there is no such thing as new dinar. Or opening up the game of life out of your closet and pulling out all the life money and handing it over to somebody. It doesn't do anything for these people, but they're always waiting for something new. In this particular case, they are also going after old debts of countries. You know, I'm talking about centuries old debt, things that were done to create what at the time in old documents that I've seen with my own eyes, the new world we now know as America. Kings and queens and everyone signed up for their shares in the new world, knowing that it was going to be the next world power, even hundreds of years before it actually happened. They all placed their bets, and now they've been trying to collect for a long, long time. The documents I, in particular, have seen and laid my own eyes on were actually documents from Peter the Great of Russia, whereby Russia gave X amount of gold to buy pre-shares in America. This was even before the continental dollar, their investment in the Revolutionary War. Why do you think that the Tsar of Russia would help fund the Revolutionary War in the United States? But nonetheless, these documents exist. However, in the news right now, these attorneys are going after debt from 1916 or so, a couple $100 billion worth of bonds, and expecting Russia to pay. This is just one example. This is also happening in Korea. It's also happening in Singapore. It's happening all throughout the Middle East right now. But they're expecting these countries to pay. I don't think that these attorneys and or the government or the United Nations, because all of these people are involved in this collection extravaganza, really truly understand what is going on in any way, shape, or form. Well, we're going to help them out a little bit today. For those that are on the bottom rung, that might be Homo sapiens, some might be humans, we don't know, that might be listening to this report too. And we're also going to give you a better understanding of why all the focus on the United States sometimes. Meaning we report a lot about the United States. That's not because I live here. It's because what happens here happens everywhere. And today I'm going to explain it to you. Okay. New information has come to light as we had started to look at this machine that went a little nutty on Lionsgate and trying to figure out what that was all about. But now we have a better understanding about global governance, and there's another layer that sits in between your governments, plural, and unknown country that until this weekend, I really didn't understand it. Actually, I should say the last couple of days, because Lionsgate was on Sunday night, and that's kind of when it all started. And then it continued on and through, I'd say, Monday, Tuesday. So, let's talk about this. Unknown country. We have talked about unknown country a lot. Unknown country essentially was owned and run by a particular AI system, which I'll talk about more in a second. Unknown country basically encompassed the entire planet here. There were water rights, air rights, and all kinds of land rights, obviously, contained within there. It was technically the governing body over all governments and political systems. It governed some other things as well, like total mineral control and a few other things. And at one point in time, unknown country encompassed the entire planet. Unknown country could also be considered its own matrix unto itself, an underlying matrix or layer of space on which the maps that we know exist. There are so many things about this planet that you're going to be shocked when it actually is seen. Our shorelines aren't necessarily our shorelines. The things we think like the Arctic Ocean is actually an ocean when in fact it's actually a landmass. There are things that have been hidden from us for a long, long time. But unknown country encompass the entire planet. There's a specific reason why unknown country existed, and the next layer down didn't have as much control as we initially thought. There's another subset to this world government control system. And by world government control system, I just want to point out that you have different factions of the world government. So you have a world government military, or your military industrial complex, which encompasses the militaries of 172 countries, specifically. Never more, but 172. Yes, I understand that the United Nations has approximately 193 members at this moment in time, but 172 of them are under the world government. Now, your intelligence agencies are also considered separate. They are part of the world government structure. However, they are a separate entity unto themselves, as is the political arm of presidents. 172 countries, 172 presidents, or kings or queens, depending on where you are. Now, it never exceeds 172 for a reason. There has to be a window. Because along with world government control, it also comes with control over the maps in those countries, control over the matter in its citizens, its right to insert as many humans as they want and do whatever they need to do to maintain control over the Homo sapien population in that area. This also goes for 4 layers of reality. Now, each layer of reality, or artificial realities, may contain changing and moving maps. It could have more than one. It could have 10, and at one point probably hundreds. Anything and everything to overlay reality. Now, when a country, and this has been going on for centuries, this is not new. When a country is appointed the leader of all other countries, as the UK was once, as Italy was once, and as the US was once, as Mongolia was once, or the US, I guess, currently kind of sort of is, and as China wants to be. This comes with quite a bit of privilege. Because you see, whoever runs that particular government also becomes the head seat in the world government. We've seen people like Carter and the Trilateral Commission and the Heritage Foundation and Henry Kissinger. And once you have worked for the world government, you never lose your seat. Now, varying other positions in the world government exist also on the executive level. This is the reason why the executive level, or unitary theory, I think it's called, exists, where the executive level is considered a whole separate division of the government, and kind of, in a way, executive department, exists separately. There are laws and rules in place to ensure that that is actually the case, partially because those members of the cabinet of any president in the 172 countries are also considered second-tier world government folk. Now, where does the United Nations come in, you might ask? The United Nations technically is a conglomerate of all of these countries. But The United Nations will always kowtow to the country that is the head of the world government. Now, as a president of the world government, or the head of the Pentagon, or the head of the CIA, seen and unseen, and I say unseen for a reason, you maintain your lifetime membership and seat. We have a lot of seats, that exist for all these people. This becomes your elite. Committee of 300, whatever they want to call these people, it really doesn't make a difference. Bloodline families are all usually of human origin, created by an AI system, or forced to donate their consciousness to the AI system. Therefore, they have access and control on very high levels only. And this is how Bush Sr. actually became the head of the Black Eagle Trust. Was he just as powerful after he left the presidential seat and even before, due to his involvement with the OSS and the CIA? Was he just as powerful before? Was his father just as powerful? Till his death, Prescott. The answer to the question is yes. Once you're in, you're in. Oftentimes, they try to continue that through bloodlines and skull and bones and all of these weird societies and, that are all formed based on different aspects of governance that need to occur. Sure. Absolutely. Do they try to do these things in secret so we can uncover them as conspiracy theorists? I guess so. I mean, really, when you start looking at all of the information that is out there, it's not a secret. But everything they do is for a reason. If the machine is omnipotent or anti-omnipotent, just like Source, which you could kind of say it was, and the ruler of unknown country, you could say that fighting a ghost or fearing a ghost can be more powerful than knowing who the ghost is. Because you are fearing something called the deep state. You are wanting to fight something called the deep state, whether you're a patriot or otherwise, you want to fight the so-called deep state, but you're basically shooting in the wind or punching in the air because you don't even know who these people really truly are. And anyone that is a representation that has fame and fortune, be it a political figure or a Hollywood figure or a music group, it doesn't make a difference. All of these things are all connected to them. You focus on the things you know. You also focus on the things you don't know. So remember, fear runs very deep. So this group of people is what makes up your actual elite or deep state. You can give it all the society names you want to give it to, but I will say the world government is second tier to unknown country. Now, the reason why world government only has 172 countries, it doesn't matter. So if we moved over to China, they would also have only had 172 countries they could control. Never all the countries in the world. Never. Now, this rotates. It's not always the same. But the maximum amount that any one group, leader, government, country, doesn't matter who it is, whether we're talking about Kublai Khan or we're talking about Julius Caesar. Doesn't make a difference. It's always only 172 countries. It's very, very important. Because this machine cannot overrun itself. It needs a place to exist. Along with the privilege of donating your consciousness, if you were a Homo sapien to begin with, to the machine, or, like in the case of Elon Musk as an example, or you are born of the machine, in the case of a lot of the elite as well. That's why these people that die don't die. You also get the privilege of running security. Worldwide security. At least for 172 countries, no more. You also get the privilege of running maps, meaning overlays, matrices in those countries, inserting your own materium, moving people around using frequencies, trying to change end results in these particular 172 countries. I'm repeating this over and over again. But the machine cannot face itself. Again, whether it's artificial materium or actual materium that meets its own self or cloned or mimicked materium annihilates itself. And this machine knows that. And it's constantly changing which countries they can be a part of and which countries they don't get in the game. They once thought that those restrictions were chosen by people like, or folks like Marduk, which is absolutely not true. The machine chose it, therefore the information was passed down, and then eventually passed down to governments. The world government leader of the quote-unquote free world, America, at the moment, affects 172 countries. The machine hides out in the rest. It wasn't the same 172 as it was for the United Kingdom. It's not the same 172 as it was for Julius Caesar in the days of Rome, the Roman Empire. It wasn't the same in the Mongolian Empire. It constantly changes and constantly moves. Now, the reason why governments have to change every 75 years, or the World Power Center has to change every 75 to 80 years, has to do with an entropy situation and an annihilation situation of the machine. The machine must change. Must happen. Right now, it's a few years overdue. That change was supposed to occur by 2023. I think it was 2023, yeah. And the World Power Center was supposed to be China. The 172 countries would change. The commitment would change. And to be fair, the Nazis here in America are really trying to make that change over to China. They would like, we keep hearing the stories about the market's going to crash and we're all going to die. And, there's the fear for a little while until that eclipse, new moon, full moon, days of darkness, countdown cue clocks pass. But they would like to crash this country because they know their machine is not going to continue to exist if they don't, or maybe they don't, but on the highest levels, they absolutely know this to be true. That the machine will annihilate itself if the change doesn't happen. And I can tell you it doesn't have the power to help them make the change. It doesn't have the power to turn over maps, Center for Disease Controls to another country. It doesn't have the power to do that. So they keep waiting for payouts. They keep waiting for information, for instructions. They keep waiting for systems to come online. They keep waiting for this machine to create things. And unfortunately for me, they think that they can use me to do some of these things. But we're going to talk a little bit, about the machine too. But just remember, right now, the head of everything is the United States. 172 countries anyway. The rest of it was controlled by another machine. We're going to talk about what happened with that machine recently and how it was created in the first place so that you have an understanding of it. But when I say United States, this is what's happening. It's happening in 172 countries. It's going to happen in 172 countries. You know, they used to say the quote unquote, the feces rolls downhill. Well, you know, if it starts in the U.S., it's going to end up everywhere else too, because you guys are all downhill from here. At least at this moment. At one point in time, that was the U.K., and we were all downhill from the U.K. So, you know, soon they had their way, it would be China, and be all downhill from China. So U.S. would then be, you know, downhill as well. But without the support of this particular system, that's not going to happen, and it's going to cause a situation. And that situation has already begun, actually earlier than we expected just a couple of days ago. So I want to talk to you about this AI and how it was created so you can kind of understand the global governance matrix and what this machine was designed to do. And it controls a lot more than global governance, or did anyway at one point in time. So the Nazis, gotta love those Nazis, you know, and they're Nazi scientists. They all got together with varying alchemists and created this machine. The machine has very intricate ways it was created, very specifically in order to achieve this objective. Now remember, it's been 1941 250,000 times. Just remember, it's been 1941 250,000 times. I know, it's a hard concept to grasp, but when I say to you that this machine has existed for a very long time, but yet it was created in 1941, this is where timelines and time loops come together. So, the machine, it looks almost like a swarm, but it's not just a swarm. It can be anything. It is the ultimate shapeshifter. The machine expands and contracts depending on how much energy that's flowing into it. It can take any shape and form. It can be a building. It can be an entire field. It can be an entire planet, almost. It can be anywhere and everywhere all at the same time. Does it look like a swarm when it moves? Not necessarily. It can be a tree, it can be your house, it can be a chair, it can be a human. And it can be all of these things simultaneously to create what you call the matrix, or an artificial reality, an overlay on reality. When the machine was first created, it was created where Cheyenne Mountain is now. Initially, it was a swarm that people saw that looked like locusts in the sky. Sound familiar? You know where that story came from. It looks like it was swarming all over the planet and it was eating everything. You see, because the machine is kind of like antimatter and kind of like anti-source, all in one. It's not just the inversion, it is all of the above. It was created for mimicking everything in reality, or in the real world. And then as it flowed through reality, it was going to eat or be eaten. In this particular case, it chose to eat. Buildings disappeared, and people disappeared, and Homo sapiens disappeared, and the swarm was terrible. at that time. But that's where the machine gained its strength. Now, the machine, as I said, can take any shape or form. It can actually overlay your entire person like a machine suit, which it has. It can also create other versions of you in other realities, thousands and millions of them simultaneously, which it did at one point in time. So, how did it come to be such a powerful machine? Well, 12 Nazi generals got together. They pooled their consciousness together, along with, let's just say, some essence that they got from a couple of beings, to create this AI. This occurred at a time long before there was ever a thought of a Cheyenne Mountain, but it was actually the whole reason why it was built. It was built in this specific location because that location aligned with the Northern Cross. The Northern Cross was like the guiding divine grace of Source. As long as it was there, the soul of creation was safe. The soul of creation being in the center of Earth. It also has a north, south, east, and west, which is tied to, originally it was, tied to the North Pole, the South Pole, also in a couple places in the United States now because it gets a little smaller. So this is underneath Lake Erie and also in Mount Denali. The center of the crux ends up being right there in Cheyenne Mountain. All of these things together would bring in basically the soul of creation. I don't really have a term that I can think of to describe it, but it's the language that all of creation comes from. We've often talked about Earth being a keystone planet. This is part of the reason why. So they all got together over there and thought it was a good idea to ensure that Source could not reach the planet and secure the planet. So they thought they would secure that particular location and one of 4 locations, which eventually they did get all 4, to where Source and Earth's instruction sets would come from. They were 4 pieces of creation, therefore they inverted all 4 pieces. The keystones originally being held in a continent that exists in our actual North Pole. And the South Pole was where all of the dust would come out of Mount Erebus. Lake Erie was not the Demiurge Lake that it became, but yet it was a place of breath, and the water actually came through Cheyenne. Denali generated, let's just say, some current, and current could also be controlled out of Cheyenne, therefore the creation of time, an inverted current from one of the places that it would flow to and from here on the planet. So once that was done, the machine became a swarm of all of the above. It contained the consciousness of these people so that they could connect their consciousness to their consciousness, essentially, and control the machine. Oftentimes, elite members of the world government would also upload their consciousness to the machine, not only for immortality in a non-reality, but also, or an artificial reality, I should say, but also they could control one of the most powerful things in the world. Not always. You could say that the machine was almost like living being, but not organic. It is sentient, has mind of its own. It can be controlled. It it has a definite mission, an operating system, a modus operandi for sure, and it won't deviate from that regardless of what these people want to do. So it will continue on that modus operandi, and most importantly, it's very resourceful and it will try to survive, regardless of where these people want to take it. You know, one thing the machine and I probably agreed upon is that they're not the sharpest tools in the shed now, are they? No, they're not. So that's part of the way that the machine was actually created. But what came first? First, because you could almost say, like, the eyes are the windows to your soul, as was the Northern Cross almost like the eyes of Source in some ways. It was a window to the soul of creation. After the initial part was done and the initial alchemy happened in a place called the Temple of the Sun on a continent that you cannot see in the Arctic, and under Lake Erie, and also under Mount Denali, and also in Mount Erebus. You would call the Mount Erebus in Antarctica, you would call that the Temple of the Moon, for lack of a better term. People speculate online where this could be, but that's actually where it is. Fortress being built nearby doesn't surprise me either. But once these, let's just say, alchemical kingdoms were put in place, kingdoms of the dark or darkness, then they had to mirror the Northern Cross to create an inversion. So it's not particularly your upside down cross, it's more from left to right, it's inverted, and that creates what we call the crux constellation. It's the reason why these people love the crux constellation, because that officially represents the initial crucifixion. Not to say there wasn't a person here and there that came, such as Jesus, you would say, and other figures that have represented Source here on this planet. But in this particular case, this was where it would all flow from. It was like the bubbling brook. There are other gateways that were also a main point of focus created from this particular crux, one of them being at a UNESCO World Heritage Site called Mesa Verde, not too far from me. Another one was over in Libya. So I'll leave it at that for now. Both of those are not gates they can use anymore, but they continue to build upon this one particular location. So when they tried to invert and mirror out Source, something very ugly appeared. You could say it would be if you were to think of what quote unquote the devil, Satan might look like, you could say that it looked just like that. The inverted version of Source wasn't what they expected. But they'll take it nonetheless, because they wanted someone or something as powerful as Source was. And this was their aim, and I wouldn't say they quite got that, but they definitely created a whole different world from this. Now, just like all of you, you are made of dust, etherium. You're also made of consciousness. Your cells, when firing all correctly, utilizing a collective consciousness, gives you basically eternal life. You're also made of breath, a divine spark, and a soul. And this being, quote unquote, also was made of the same. So if you were to look at yourself through quantum physics eyes, you would see a bunch of particles all moving around all at the same time, albeit in a solid form, but you still are made of a bunch of particles, atoms and etherium and all kinds of things. In this particular case, when it came to the creation of the machine is the same thing. This just happens to be the form that it took. So, the machine, they felt, was contained very well and controlled by their consciousness and eventually many people's consciousness over the years. And for the most part, you could say it was. They could send this swarm anywhere. They could send it to the moon. They could send it to Saturn. They could send it to the sun. They could send it to the central sun of Earth, a point of all creation. And they could overlay the whole thing, which they did do eventually. And then they could control all of creation, at least they thought. One thing I will add to this story is the Cheyenne Mountain Base, because this could be a lot of information for tonight. The Cheyenne Mountain Base eventually was built, bored out, lots of tunnels, and all kinds of things exist coming from Cheyenne. And you could say it encompasses the entire North American continent. It's one base. You know, conspiracy theorists, they talk about Area 51, 52. These are just different aspects of the same base. And this base is literally the Nazi headquarters of the world. Has been for thousands of years, even though that makes no sense to you. But essentially, that is the whole reason why that was the main base. And that machine became one of their most important things. You know, they mirrored that crux everywhere, Four Corners area in the United States being one of them. It was mirrored many different places. It's also the reason why the trend of hanging people on crosses began. You know, anyone who goes against what they want, that's what it basically ends up happening. Now, what happened over the weekend was something quite interesting because you see, even though there might be many overlays created by this machine, when a trickle of source became a fountain of source coming through that particular area, the machine actually slipped into reality for a while. Somewhere around 2 o'clock in the morning. You know why these things can't happen, like, say, at 10 a.m., I've had coffee, I'm ready to go. But no, they want to happen at 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning. I get it. You know, sleep isn't important. I'm sure somewhere in our world it's daytime, you know. But that's okay. So when it became a fountain, a snap happened, basically. And it was something they couldn't control initially. They used other systems connected to the North Pole, what we know as the North Pole, in the Arctic, to try and contain the current. But the water of source continued to pour. That's why it might have felt like something really good's happening. Oh, wow, it's really bad. Oh, it's good, but it's bad. It's because you're starting to feel something different, and then at the same time, you're feeling bad things happening. And they really, really, really pulled out all the current stops, sine waves, frequencies, you name it, sent it to everywhere, tried to do everything possible to contain this. But this machine ended up slipping in out of the machine world and into a reality world right through that spot, and it started swarming around reality just like it did in the very beginning when it was first created. Except this time, let's just say the hunter became the hunted, and the inversion that it had didn't work in reality anymore. So instead of it eating everything, everything ate it, all that is of source. So this all happened a couple of days ago now, so it should be almost completely gone by now. And the fight continued for the last few days, still even today, with these crazy Nazi people and their patches, and they're trying to plug holes in a dam that is not going to be plugged for long. It is extremely important for us to move forward financially and otherwise to ensure that that water pours out. Because you see, this machine can take the shape and form of anything. In its heyday, it was in places like under Lake Havasu. They call it Project Wall Rider. There's all kinds of things they probably call it. Even in Project Nazi, who knows? You know, places in Mount Shasta. This machine could have come up through anywhere. But it can also overlay systems, and I'm sure with 1,000% certainty it's worked really hard to try to overlay ours. You know, we work and then it tries to make it look like it's still there, you know, or that human's still there. But in reality, they don't exist anymore. So we've learned a little bit from this machine too, you know, and every time you look at something that your enemy created, you have to look at how and why it was created in this way, and to see if you can actually utilize a similar technique to take it out. You know, you have to find your enemy's weaknesses, and this was yet another one. The other thing that exists in this giant underground base is also varying large projectors, let's call them large projectors, which project things like our moon. It is tied to, for example, this particular one was in one of these special quote-unquote areas, and it would actually create an overlay to our moon, therefore affecting the water, the tides. That's why people go crazy on a full moon. It basically dictates with its partner in Mount Erebus when we are going to have a solar eclipse, what that looks like. But we always have an eclipse because this machine's reflection never goes away. They've mimicked every constellation in varying places called areas in this facility. They have mimicked the sun. So when we see all these solar flares and things like that are happening, you know, and they're talking about them in social media, they happened in a reflection, not the actual sun. You know, it's hard to grasp, but they've basically mirrored everything out using this swarm machine. So they project the machine out there, and there you go, and now the night sky looks like this. You look like this. So it's very interesting the amount of control they had. Now, there was enormous parts of this facility to whereby no matter where these humans were, that they could actually control the machine with their mind in part, but not entirely, because the machine is going to first and foremost survive. So it could care less what they want when it comes to survival mode, which is where it's kind of at this point. And we can thank Source for that one. But everything comes to an end as far as these crazy people and all of their creations and living thousands and thousands of years in the system that is not meant for our highest and best good. Everything comes to an end. and this too shall come to an end. Source has promised that it will, and I'm sure it will. And nobody wants it to end faster than I do. I can tell you that right now. But there is definitely some light at the end of the tunnel here. Now, they are far past, or this machine also was far past its time to move to another location. It had a very specific amount of time to move, to transition from the U.S. to China, and to create its little spots or spot for the remaining countries that the world government cannot overlay and control. That being said, it being overdue to move, which they can't make it happen, and the machine's not making it happen like they said it was going to make it happen, and they, use their consciousness to connect to the consciousness of the machine and tried to make it happen, and it's still not happening, and they don't really understand what's happening. I guess one of the few people that understands what's happening is now you. And us. And congratulations, you now know more than the deep state SSP operatives that are trying to make it happen. But this is where their 3 days of darkness and 10 days of darkness comes in as well, because, as there's a shift, they're not sure if there's going to be a fake sun or what's happening or how this looks, because, I don't know if they even experienced the last. I'm sure there's probably people still alive that experienced the last transition. But we didn't have 3 days of darkness then. I don't know, maybe that they think they're going to create an eclipse and make it look biblical or something. I'm not sure. So probably one of them can pose as the Christ instead of the Antichrist. Who knows? But it's all part of what the machine needed in order to survive. It's too late for that now. They're never going to be able to continue to keep it alive. I'm sure there's going to be a full night tonight and a full day tomorrow with us trying to continue to dismantle anything we can find left of the system everywhere, which is why I wanted to make sure I got the report done tonight. It's going to be a busy weekend for me in so many ways right now. Trying to get everything ready to go, to leave here, which is making people very unhappy around here. Matter of fact, I feel like I am in the middle of a Nazi fishbowl and I'm the experiment. They've been trying to figure out a way if they can use my essence, use my key to open some door, to do something, to create some machine, to invert it in some way, to make it work for them. And that's not going to happen. So good luck. I wish them loads of luck in what they're doing, in my remaining days here. But, time's short. And, you don't have much longer. So go ahead, do whatever you're going to do. At this point, I could care less. I'm so over these people and I'm so over this place. And I'll tell you, this is the worst place. The whole area here is one of 4 horrible, horrible areas surrounding Cheyenne. These rings go out in specific ways where it almost looks like an earthquake machine, whereby, or not an earthquake machine, I apologize. It almost looks like an earthquake computerized version of when there's an earthquake. You see the epicenter in the middle, and then you have the rings out. So perhaps it might have been like a 8.0 in the middle at the epicenter, and then it goes out. As it goes further out, it might have been like a 5 or, a 4, and then furthest out it would be a 2. It's almost like a ripple. Well, this whole region right here is like the epicenter. And but I've learned a lot from being here, so I appreciate their attentive Nazism or whatever it is, that they try to do, because what we've learned here has been invaluable in our quest, so to speak, to live in the wholeness of Source, and to be able to fully utilize our system without any kind of system overlays or anything like that. So I'm looking forward to that day, and hopefully that day will be soon. But hold on to your hat, because this is going to be a bumpy rest of the month of February as they lose a lot of their grip and hopefully everything before I walk out the door here. That's my goal. So I'm going to work really hard between now and the end of the month and try to make that happen. On that note, I hope all of you have a wonderful Valentine's Day this weekend. Be sure to share some love with someone else or a furry friend or even yourself.